So we're talking about compensation 1 year later after all these new forms came out. So we're in September. They've been out since I guess last August. Um, first of all, let me get y'all's input. What are y'all seeing out there as far as compensation on anything, on whether you're working with the listing, the contract writing on a listing, the leases, the tenant on the leases? What are y'all seeing happening now that it's been a year? How has those discussions changed from when you started to now? And so, as we're moving forward on this recording, because I would like to post it, commissions are now bananas. Okay. So, during this hour, we're talking bananas here. So, you're going to do a dozen bananas or 3 dozen bananas or 4 dozen bananas, whatever. But what's been happening with you guys? What have you seen has become, how did it start? Let's deal with last year at this time. And then now, what's it like now? So what was it like right when all this came out? Because I know the public kind of had a knowledge of the NAR settlement. And how did that work?
Mine are just putting it in the contract. I'm in the offer.
Right, that's now, but back when we were starting,
Mhm.
I
what
mean, I
was
remember
going?
talking to a lot of people who like still didn't really know anything about it.
Okay.
Or people are like, "Oh, I heard sellers aren't paying commission anymore and the buyers have to pay their agents." Like it was one extreme or the other.
Yeah. Okay.
The other thing that I noticed early on, say last fall, less so this year and almost nothing now, is agents would ask about is buyer offering compensation?
Seller. Yeah.
Or excuse me, if seller is the seller offering compensation where they would and ask that when they ask for a showing or maybe a
Okay.
follow-up to the showing. I don't get any, I haven't gotten anything like that for, I can't even remember, 6 months, maybe.
So
Um,
as a group, how many last fall, you would call the listing agent and ask them what was going on with compensation? How many? I did. Okay. Now,
I
did
never did.
you
I
did you
just
never
submit the
did?
offer. I never did.
She's a rebel. You're a
yes.
rebel. That's why you never did.
Yeah. I just submit the offer. I'm bringing the
Because
money.
Messina, she knew what the contract said. That's why
Yep.
she never asked, right?
Yep.
Now, how many this year call and ask the listing agent? Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's where the practice has come now. And I remember showing, was it last fall or January, I guess? And I asked, well, what are you offering out? And the agent said, the seller's just going to wait and see what comes in. Like my first thought was, okay. And then it just kind of took on a life of its own. I think that is what's happening now. And I think everyone realizes that. So now, what are you seeing? Is there any confusion on it? What's the dialogue with the seller, and what are your dialogues with the buyer? And I'll pop up some. I'll share some of the documents here. So what kind of
I,
discussions
I
are you
think
having?
on my listing, I prepare the seller that the buyer commission is expected. They have the power to negotiate, but the pro and con of paying a buyer agent.
Okay. And what is that? What's in that discussion? What do you say?
Well, when they ask me, I mean, normally they don't ask, but I say, would you like, are you interested to know what my commission is? And then I will say whatever I charge.
Mhm.
And this is, and then I started, I said, this is my portion of commission. And usually they will say, what do you mean? It's like the buyer is going to negotiate their commission. So
Mhm.
you have the power to say, I'm not going to pay, I'm going to pay this much, or you're going to offer what most of the market is paying. So the
Right.
benefit would that be the buyer is coming up with all the money. And usually they have to pay closing costs, down payment. They don't have the money to cover the agent fee.
Thank you, Messina. The buyer is coming up with all the money.
Yeah.
Guys, that's the biggest statement right there. Your mortgage, you bought the house for 400, you're selling for 750. The house you sold, the buyer's now buying for $350,000 more. They are coming up with all the money. All they're asking for is some compensation for their buyer agent. Yeah, that's good. All right, so looking at this listing brokers, we got the listing broker compensation. We now know that's where it goes. I'm putting in how many bananas, whether it's in percentage or flat dollar amount. I'm putting in there if this expires or you terminate the agreement and someone buys it that I marketed to, I got 30 days. Then we got B here. Who is adding on a little bit more compensation if they have an unrepresented buyer? I don't see all the things here. Yeah. I do. And I would submit to everyone, you should be adding and maybe you're putting it in there and saying, well, nothing, I'll just do it for the same amount I'm doing. I'm doing a dozen bananas. Whether I got, if there's a buyer unrepresented, I'll still do it for a dozen bananas. You will say that until you do a couple of them who are unrepresented. And then is it just me? You'll realize there's a lot of work here. It's not about me getting double dip. That is not it at all. It's about me having to get double work. Anybody got a comment on that on B?
No,
I did put 1.5.
Sherry, what'd you say?
I put 1.5 on mine.
You know you're going to do at least 50% more work. At least. Anybody else?
I put 1% in. The conversation I have with the client is.
I'm sorry, you put in a dozen bananas. That's what you do.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, sorry. A dozen widgets.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
And the conversation with the client is, if there is an unrepresented party that wants to buy the house, chances are they're not sophisticated. And that's going to mean a lot more work in trying to shepherd them through. I also point out, if that happens, that's a good thing, because instead of potentially paying, 2.5 bananas, 1.5 bananas in this scenario stays in your pocket.
Yeah.
So it's an opportunity. But I also indicate in my career, I've had 2 unrepresented buyers for my listing. So it's not.
Yeah. I've had like 2 or 3. It's not as usual as it is. Now, there are some agents that they've got a system they've got in place where they have a lot of buyers in their database and they'll try to sell it within. And it does save the sellers some money on compensation on their net. So that's a good thing there. But I'll just submit to you, if you get an unrepresented buyer, that is a lot more work. And you don't realize it until you get your first one and they say, I'll never do that again. All right. And
Anthony, how about referring it out? I don't want to deal with unrepresented buyers. So I will refer it out for in-house agent and get referral fee out of it.
There you go.
Yeah. Anthony, another thing, I had a seller challenge me about. He says that you say you're not doing the double side, dual representation.
Right.
So why is it you're charging me for an unrepresented buyer? So
I don't represent. Yeah. What do you
explain the difference between the two?
Yeah. I may not represent them, but I still got to do the runaround.
Yes.
I still got to do the paperwork. I got to hound them and make sure that they're done. We had one where it was like we're about to go to closing on it. And let me see if my agent is here. She's not. I wish she was here. Yeah. It was something else, man. It was like, and the buyer was an attorney.
Oh, God.
He told us that he was not going to and I had to have a very direct email and call with him and said, I appreciate you. And this is where you you're like respectful, but direct. I respect that you're an officer of the court of the state of Virginia. I really do. And that you do all these things you do. With all due respect, you missed so many deadlines. If you'd been my agent, I would have yanked you into my office and had a harsh discussion with you. because you would not have represented your client well. That's what you did for yourself. And we had the discussion. And so, but he wanted no help. And he was like lambasting the realtor when she would ask for this or that. Like, I know that. Like, that's what that unrepresented buyer was having that kind of thing with him. And so it was not the nicest thing. Anyway, anybody else on this one, on the unrepresented? I like what Messina says. Messina's down the road of, I don't want to deal with them. I'll give it to one of my agents in the office to deal with for a lesser commission, but that's not free money, but that's a nice little, great, I've got this deal I'm going to work on, and she's still represented by us. The buyer's not represented by us, but we've got this thing going on where we're still doing both. We're getting the work done. Melanie, what you got?
You just have to weigh on that.
Go ahead.
Doing a referral to, do designated representation is what Messina's talking about. Is weigh, okay, what is the net cost to the client, the seller, versus the potential less friction in the transaction and a higher or lesser chance that something goes totally sideways.
That's a really good point. The less friction. Yeah, this is not a let me see what I can do and get all these unrepresented buyers in, Mr. and Ms. Seller. That's not what we're trying to do here. But there are people who will write a contract on your house and say, I do not want an agent. Because they still got this idea in their brain, I'm saving them money so I can come down on the price. Are you saving all the work? Excuse me. They're not.
You have to make sure you have to make sure you let them know too that you are representing the seller.
Yeah.
You're just doing
the seller. I just do all the work for you. Melanie, you got your hand raised.
Yeah. So if it's in the case of an investor, would you just, instead of charging your seller that 1.5 bananas, would you potentially just tell the investor, I will charge you a flat fee or a whatever number of bananas to write your contract and save your seller?
No.
Okay.
That's a really good point. What Melanie, I like what you said, and let me explain this real quick. This is an exclusive right to sell listing agreement. Who's this with?
The brokerage and the seller.
The brokerage. It is with your business. And there's a point where you have a fine line of separation of, I don't know if it's a separation, but you got two sides of this thing going on here. I represent you, Mr. Seller. I'm going to take care of you, represent you, tell you when there's a problem, save you money, save you heart, reduce the friction. By the way, here's what I charge. Not my job to save you money on what I charge. Okay? Like, would I do, and that's a good point, would I charge, if it's an investor and there's not as much work, would I cut it? If y'all want to, go ahead and do that. I just say there's still the same amount of work. There's still a lot of stupid investors out there who think they know what they're talking about because they've seen enough videos. They did one flip and, and so they think they know everything. If they want to damage themselves, fine. But I know, here's what I know. I know that I don't know everything about that person. And so I don't know what I'm going to run into. So this is my business part. I charge a dozen bananas. That's what I charge. And if I have an unrepresented client, I charge only 5 bananas. Okay. There's a little bit less because I am working both sides, but Mr. and Ms. Seller, I am working hard to keep them in line, keep the friction down, represent you, and get the deal done and get to closing. And there's work on that. Just because I throw in the tires, the mechanic still has to go get the tires and do the work and balance them and check the brakes. Even though he's throwing the tires in free, he's making a little bit more money, but he still has all the work. That's the thing about B. There's still work to be done, and I'm not going to do it for free. And don't make apologies for doing it free. Melanie, I'm not coming after you. I'm just passionate about this one. Please say okay. But yeah, and say, now if they bring it up, say, well, this is an unrepresented buyer who doesn't know anything. Okay, you're going to charge me 5 bananas. But what if it's an investor who knows everything? Can you do it for 3 bananas? If it's a big thing to the seller, sure. But then the one time I do that, you know what's going to happen. I'm going to have the investor who thinks he knows it all or she knows it all, and they're gonna get it wrapped around the axle. And I'm spending more time with it, and now I'm getting paid less than what I normally do for my service that I do, my expertise. Here's the thing. I heard this on a movie and it was great. You want to write this down. This is a great line. So that's what it cost, Anthony? No, that's what it's worth.
Amen.
Write that down. It's a movie line.
Going home?
I heard it in a
Yeah,
movie.
fine.
And I said, wow, that cost a lot. He said, that's what it cost. And the guy looked at it and says, no, that's what it's worth. Does that shift a mindset here?
The
It
other
reminds me
thing,
of the story up in this guy up in Massanutten. He wanted to put in the pond, wanted to build a little lake for himself.
Okay.
And he and when he did,
You went silent, Barbara. Maybe when she comes back, she can finish her story.
Anthony, to your point, which is
Yeah.
that's just brilliant.
yeah,
Oh, you back, Barbara? Okay, go ahead.
yeah, I am. The guy says I can put in this pond, and somebody who knew the system said, yeah, I'll charge. Yeah, I know how to do it. Here, just pay me $2,500. I'll go and I'll get it taken care of for you. It was a $25 piece of paper is all he needed to do. It's not how much it cost, it was how much it was worth.
Yeah. Yeah. It's the thing the story told where they get this consultant who comes in because this manufacturing plant shut down because something's wrong. And he comes in, he marches around all the equipment, he's there 15 minutes, he takes out his hammer, he taps on something.
But Anthony,
Yeah.
hello?
Hello? Yeah. Messina?
I think it's my phone.
Okay. All right. And so he says, no, what you're paying me, the $10,000 was not the 15 minutes. You're paying me for what I knew where to go tap the machinery. Anyway, Scott, you had a comment.
No, just that's just the best point that we can ever think about is that what's the worth of what we do. And so if you're working with an unrepresented buyer on the other side, I would make the point that the time to decide whether or not to give your seller client, some discount or rebate back is right the day before settlement, when you know how much work have you had to do, whether it's with an investor or a non-investor unrepresented party, because at that point you can assess, well, how much extra work have I done? If it's been seamless and you want to give your client a rebate, then you're determining the worth of what you delivered to them versus.
That is so good. Yeah. Remember what you're having to do. Think about being a buyer agent. You're tracking down the information for the seller for the loan. You're finding out the financing. Do you have your insurance ready? Do you have all that? And then you turn around and you call the listing agent. This is what's going on. That process is not happening when you have an unrepresented buyer. That agent over there helping you out is not there making sure it happens. You got to make sure it happens. And so
isn't that a slippery slope? Like, you have to sit down the buyer, explain to them, you're representing the seller. You're not going to give them an advice. I mean, what they're paying you for then?
Who's paying you for?
The seller is going to pay you for, but the buyer is completely unrepresented, like literally.
Right. They are. What I'm saying is that usual process that's there is not there now. And I have to fill the gap. So I'm making the case for, I'm not going to do this for less money because I'm getting this quote unquote, both sides of the deal. I'm not getting both sides. I'm working both. The work doesn't go away just because an unrepresented buyer walks in the door. That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
And the additional potential issue with an unrepresented buyer, when you're working with a buyer agent, you're not directly interfacing with the principal.
Yep.
You have a buyer agent that can explain certain things to their client. Let's say about home inspection issues. Whenever you're dealing with a principal, and you always have the potential that they think they know more than they do, and they get emotion involved, and that becomes a potentially a very difficult interaction with the other side to keep the transaction on track. And that is where the worth is, I would argue.
Yeah. That's the worth. It's not the cost, it's the worth. And the worth of your labor is there. Look, you're asking me to take care of the lower part of the car, but you don't want me to get paid for it. I really don't get I don't get any pushback on sellers. But as your fearless leader, I get a lot of listing agreements that have 0 here. And I'm like, you're going to do 75% more work and you're not going to get paid for it? It just amazes me. And I think part of it is a mindset. That's why I'm spending some time here. Part of it is a mindset, but there's a certain portion of the market that they do not want to have a buyer agent because they don't understand that this is going to get negotiated. And 90%, 95% of the time, I'm giving away my next portion here. 95% of the time, I'm going to say 99% of the time, they're working it out. The buyer is bringing all the money to the table and asking for a rebate back for compensation, and they're in the form of the contract. It's not happening. Let's put it that way. Melanie, what you got?
So just a point of clarity for Maryland. So since in Maryland, the buyer's compensation is still paid through the listing broker. So since on a Maryland contract, you might have 5.5 bananas or 6 bananas, which you and then, will pay out 2.5 or 3 of those bananas to the buyer agent.
Yeah, just real quick. I'm trying to say a dozen bananas, all right? And you guys are giving up. No, it's 5.5, and it's 6, and it's 3. And you're just replacing the word. You guys are killing me here. Just say a dozen.
Sorry.
I want to post this.
I don't want
to get a call from the legal department that, hey, you said commissions on here. We're going to get you. But anyway, so I'm sorry.
Okay.
I had to say that.
Yeah. Okay. So 10 bananas, in the contract, and then you in turn pay out a couple of those bananas to the buying agent. So with an unrepped buyer, then if you're doing that work, so you just get all the bananas since you had all the bananas anyway.
Right. Well, in Maryland, this is a good point. I don't know how many Maryland folks we have here. Maryland has an interesting, they decided to keep going down the route and give the seller a choice. The seller can pay a dozen bananas to me and then let me chop up some of those bananas to hand out as the broker to a buyer broker. Or they can pay me only, 6 or 7, half a dozen bananas and then leave it in the contract with an addendum for the buyer agent to say, okay, I see the listing company is giving me this many bananas and I want this many more from the seller. So they went down a different path than what we did here. We just said, just put it in the front of the contract. The contract in Maryland does not have compensation in it. It's on an addendum because they've held on to the listing brokerage still handing out some compensation or a portion of the compensation or no compensation. As a listing agent, I probably would just say, I want my dozen and let's see what comes in. And when the agents start writing contracts, they'll say, what's being offered? I'll say, nothing's being offered. Just put it in your offer. And any agents that are working both sides of the river, they kind of get that piece. So for the Maryland agents, there is a difference. Yeah.
Okay, so I understand what you're saying. If it's you're the listing agent and it's a rep normal contract, but I'm saying, so if it's an investor or another unrepped buyer, if the seller has agreed for you to put
money
extra bananas in there to them, right? If you have an unrepped investor or buyer and you end up doing both sides, you just get all the bananas versus in the Virginia contract where you might put
Yes.
you know.
Yeah, and I think, and what you might want to do, because you're talking about, well, can I give a discount if I get the unrepresented buyer? Yeah, you can. You can put anything in the listing agreement. Hey, you're going to give me a dozen bananas. I'm going to offer out this portion to the buyer agents. But if I have an unrepresented buyer, the dozen bananas goes down to, 10 bananas. I'm still going to do the work, but you get a discount because they're not represented. I'm not really having to hand out money for the buyer agent side, but I'm going to be running the duties of the buyer agent. So you could still do that.
Okay, and you need to explicitly state that in the listing agreement that if you have an
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Now in Maryland, real quick, in Maryland, remember there still is sub agency. So I would submit unrepresented buyer who does not have an agent. Because they could have an agent without having agency in Maryland. It's rare, but they could still happen. So that, well, I don't have an agent, and then we're not offering anything, and then suddenly a sub agent shows up in the deal, and we've got this. So that's why I would say I would have it specifically spelled out. If there's an unrepresented buyer who does not have an agent, I would say it like that. An unrepresented, because they could have an agent but not be represented. See what I'm saying? Because they're doing sub agency in Maryland. Everyone that's in Virginia, forget what I just said. Okay, that has no bearing to your contract whatsoever. All right, somebody else had a comment?
Yeah, Anthony, would you want to say to the unrepresented buyer, make certain that they understand that this is not a dual agency situation?
Yes. And this would be, remember, in your contract, you would have the disclosure of brokerage relationship form to go with this contract. So that buyer agent knows, look, I'm helping you get things done, but I do not represent you. So I don't have to reveal things to you that I know about the seller that I might have to if I was representing you. Are you sure you don't want to have an agent? Now that seems like counterintuitive because like, wow, I get to save my seller some money, but I like what Scott says. Yeah, but it reduces your friction and there's not as much chance of anybody suing if it goes sideways. Okay. All right. So listing brokerage fee, this is all part of the contract, part of the fee here. If you came in fall of 2023, then your minimum fee is $295. If you came in fall of 2023, October, you got to put $295. Now the rest of you can still put whatever you want. I charge about $495. I see some agents charging upwards of $900. I still want to learn how to do that.
I started charging $695 and my clients haven't batted an eye. I just explained to them that it's the fee to process all the documents and the paperwork, and they say okay. Yeah. So don't be scared. Just start charging more.
All right. Now let's talk about this just for a second. I am getting paid up here for my work. Why should I take out of what I'm getting paid for my work to pay for someone else's work? Why? I've heard some people, well, that's just the cost of doing business. It doesn't have to be. Look, I'm hiring someone to do the transaction coordination. That's not my job. I'm doing the representation and agency work. And this, I'm telling you, you do 10 deals a year, this is $5,000 that you're not having to deduct because you're hiring a TC or whatever else you're hiring. I do the listing broker service fee. It helps compensate me for the TC work, the photos, the signs, all the expenses of my transaction. Okay. So that's where this really can come in handy. She's doing $695. I'm hearing $995. It depends on how much work assistance you're getting out of there. And guys, this is not a money grab. This is a cost of doing business. They have the business of selling their house, and I have the business of coordinating it all. Might I end up eating this for some reason? Yeah, I could end up eating it. But I think if you want to start making some more money to cover your expenses, start putting it in C. All right. Okay. That's all on the listing agreement. Any more questions or comments on the listing agreement? Okay. So now we've got this listing agreement addendum. I just want to go through this to be clear if everyone understands this. On the listing agreement under compensation, are you first get permission from the seller Are you going to have the obligation to, are you going to pay a buyer agent compensation? The seller authorizes or does not authorize broker to disclose to prospective buyers, representing buyers, to negotiate with buyer. I would say, yeah, you want to authorize it. Okay. And then that takes us to this form. And these are the 2 points on this form that we sometimes get a little mixed up on. One, if they're going to pay compensation in our listing agreement, we have to have this signed. Yes, I'm going to pay compensation. This is part of the negotiation. If they say no, say, okay, they can say no, they're not going to pay, but then what happens with the contract? What comes in the door?
Compensation.
Right.
Request for compensation.
It's almost like we had these forms introduced last fall, and it's like, why do we have this form anymore? But I guess it's the pre-agreement, so it's completely transparent. There's no foggy mirror. Yeah, you said you would, and here it is. It shows up in the contract. But even if a seller doesn't have this, a seller would say, I thought I wasn't paying it. It's negotiable. So negotiate. We'll cross it out. And then the buyer walks and they wonder what happened. So anyway. And then 2, so you can get one signed here. I'm willing to pay up to X amount. What I'm seeing a lot here, y'all, is TBD, to be determined. I don't want to even put out there what I might be willing to accept. Okay. Because when a buyer calls you, a buyer is, well, how much did he put on this form? Is that in his best interest to tell ahead of time what I'm willing to pay? No. So I kind of disagree with, I mean, I know why we have it. It's to be transparent, but a lot of sellers saying, I get it. It's negotiable. Put TBD on B. And
can we put TBD?
TBD on B.
Can we put that on there?
Yeah. You space TBD in the documents.
Do we need to have like them initial next to it since it's not an actual dollar amount, like the sellers initial it?
If you want.
Better safe than sorry.
Yeah.
So Anthony, I'll give you the counter to that.
Okay, good.
So I put discussing compensation for the buyer's side with the client. We have a discussion of the up to amount and put that in 1A because I want that discussion to have happened and to have some agreement or communication on that point. But on number 2, do not check that. Because what I tell clients is if that's checked and I get asked, it's roughly the same thing as if you've checked, you can disclose that you have another or the ethical obligation to disclose, do you have another offer in hand? So you don't check 2. So if you get asked a question, you don't have an obligation to say that your client is willing to agree to up to X, because if you do that, they're not going to hear up to, they're just going to hear X.
Wow, that's a really good point. Thank you very much. I'm going to change
an offer. To submit an offer with whatever terms, and then you react to that rather than, because if somebody asks me, and I don't often get asked, I just say, look, my client is willing to consider paying an amount for buyer agent compensation. What matters to them is the net sale result.
Right. And this is our discussion with it. Thanks for that explanation. Thank you for that legal insight. Because I think what you're doing right there, now I have an understanding of it. You're memorializing. We had this discussion. We said a dozen bananas. We said, 7, 8 bananas. We had that discussion. So this should not be a surprise to you. I like that a lot. And then I don't think it's in their best interest to sign to. So I don't have them sign to or block it off. I can tell you something's coming up, but I don't have to tell you what it is. Okay. So this is the listing agreement addendum on the optional buyer's broker compensation. Then we get really into it. What are we doing now? Now we've got this right here. And that's the seller subsidy, the seller payment towards buyer brokerage compensation. I'm not really seeing any issue here. You guys turn these things in, they're filled out and they're accepted. And are y'all getting any pushback? And when you do get pushback, what are you doing?
I have a question for the group, just on the buy side and the sell side. How many bananas, in the vernacular we're using, are you seeing for 2E on offers coming in, submitted or received?
You can get me in trouble, man.
I'm seeing 2.5 bananas.
Oh, wow. There you go.
I did see 3 bananas on one.
Okay.
I'm
just
seeing,
curious.
I would submit to you folks, I'm having a lot of agents come to me and saying they're getting more bananas than they ever have before because of this change.
Interesting. Okay.
Not always, but the fact that they can actually negotiate for it has changed the game. And
I think
I am,
go ahead.
what's that, Roshana?
I think it depends on where it is because I think we probably could get 2 dozen bananas if it's in DC right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, geez.
That is so true because what's the DC market? DC is an absolute buyer's market. It's just not like Virginia. We have a buyer market mentality, but by the numbers, it's still a seller's market. In DC, folks, it's a buyer's market. It's a 6-month supply. You walk in there and say, "I want the whole banana tree," they're going to give it to you. It's in a rough spot because they're just not being absorbed in DC. And I'm telling you, if you got some clients who want the urban feel and next to Metro and they work in DC or next to DC and they love that, you need to get them out to go buy some properties in DC. There's some good deals, properties fixed up, just waiting for a buyer. Anyway, that's if you got a DC license. If you don't, we have plenty of DC licensees in the building. So just put it out there. I need a DC agent and get a good referral fee on that. That is so true, which it is market driven. See, and that's the thing in Virginia, we have been in an under 2-month supply for years. And so that's why you're having a little bit difficult time. But I am seeing agents getting, a bunch of bananas that they never got before on E. Because they're just if you're the only offer and you're not asking for a bunch of bananas, that's on you. At least ask for it. But where do you got to have it? You got to have that number in your buyer broker agreement. Okay. Any other questions on that? Real quick, I'm going to go through tenant broker compensation. Excuse me. Exclusive right to list leasing. And this is where Maryland is still flowing it on the sales side like this. And we're doing the same thing in Virginia. We are still doing compensation through the listing brokerage. Okay. So we've got broker compensation of X% or a month's rent. Generally, it's about a 1 month's rent is what we're seeing. And then they're offering out the tenant broker compensation from the listing company. Okay. So that's what's going on there still. But the tenant agreement may still be different. This is where you can start working to get a little more money on this because we used to be, all my money coming to working with that tenant is coming from the landlord. Now with the negotiation and it's only between us, I can ask for more. But here, this comes from the first month's rent. It's paid to the listing company and the listing company still sends it over there. Now with these changes, I'll tell you some of the weird practices I'm seeing. Listing agents who don't care breaking the law and want money sent to them as a listing agent. And this is more than once. I've had several. Yeah, just send it to me, my Venmo, and I'll forward it over. And you've got to stop that. You just got to stop it in its blocks, in its breaks. And I mean, there is a Venmo business account, but I wouldn't trust it. I want a check written, certified funds to send to the brokerage. And there are agents doing that, and you got to stop that in its tracks.
How is that allowed?
It's not. They just do it. And there are agents that if they're competing, they'll just do what the listing agent says. It's not allowed. So
That's a violation. They need to be reported.
Yeah, they need to be reported. So be aware of that. You're going to hear it and just say, well, that violates the law. No, it can be done. Well, it can be done if you don't mind going to jail. Okay. You got a cellmate picked out? Here we go. Good. Okay.
Here's the phone number for the Commonwealth's Attorney Office. Why don't we get that?
Yeah.
See what they say.
Do that and give me a posting on it. Now, with this agreement still in place, this is the agreement, the addendum. It's not an addendum, it's a tenant agreement. This is how you get paid from the other broker. Notice who signs this. It's the brokers that sign it. Now, this makes it look like on the signature line that the landlord has to sign it and the listing broker. If you're listing a property, then it's just me and the tenant broker. That's the two that got to sign this. It's got landlord listing broker here in case you're working with a landlord that does not have a listing brokerage. That's why the landlord is on here. Okay. A rent by owner, an RBO. Otherwise, on your listings, I'll sign here, and then you have this ready to send to the tenant agent's broker who signs it as well. And that's where this is memorialized on paragraph 2. Okay. Everybody got that? All right. I think we knew that this whole commission thing was going to settle it out itself, and it finally did. And I think we're past the consternation of what do I do? How's this going to look like and all that stuff. And it kind of has taken on a life of its own. And it seems to me it's working out pretty well. So particularly now that it's negotiable, you may go low, you may go high, but sometimes you're going to go high and you're going to get it because that's what you're worth. Remember the line from today. Is that what it costs? No, that's what it's worth. My services are worth that. The value I bring to the table. Start talking like that. Okay? That way you're going to remove the temptation to be the lowest common denominator on your compensation.
May I ask a question?
Yes.
Real quick. I heard somebody mention the other day that a listing agent for a property, not a rental, had said, you know, they have the owner was paying compensation, but that they were offering another, like, let's say $1,000 extra or something. How does that work if we have a rep agreement and you're just saying, this is how much, this is how many bananas are in the rep agreement, but this guy's offering you a couple of oranges on the side?
Yeah, that's a good point. You know, I think
how do we really deal with that?
Yeah, that is in the agreement. Oops. Let me look at that real quick.
I mean, like for this particular property, maybe it was harder to sell or it's been on the market longer. So now they're offering something a little extra for the
I know that's
buyer,
something in your
for the
notes.
buyer's agent.
Pull this up. All right. If broker receives any compensation from seller or seller's representative for services covered by it, that amount will be credited toward buyer's obligation. Huh.
So they don't get anything.
Well, because it used to say that in here.
Right. Because somebody asked me the other day about it, and I was like, I don't think you can take it.
Well, what you would have to do is, no, you could take it, but then before you get to closing,
Yeah.
You're just going to have to get the agreement, the amendment here.
Amendment to your rep agreement?
Yeah.
Okay.
The brokerage representation agreement amendment.
Okay.
And so you would go down here to buyer tenant agreements between whoever, other.
Okay.
You know, agent will receive bonus on the purchase of 123 Lois Lane of $1,000. I would put it property specific because that's the whole thing about all this transparency. It's got to be known now, not later.
Yeah.
And I've seen some documents and had to have some discussions with agents. Well, we're trying to make it flexible so we don't have to massage all this paperwork. You got to massage the paperwork. Okay.
Yeah, not only property specific, but say buyer offered
Yeah.
credit bonus, something like that. So it's clear that it's
right.
driven.
We'll see. Yeah, that's a good point. We'll see a seller offered $1,000 bonus on 1, 2, 3 lowest lane. That's a really good point. Scott, what would I do without you, man? I would.
Your life would be easier, probably.
No. Thank you. It's the devil's in the details. All right. Anything else?
One last question, and also,
Okay.
can you hang on for 10 seconds after this? But are you seeing anybody charging retainer fees, not for rentals, which I know you always tell us to do,
Yeah,
or suggest that we do.
Have
But
not seen retainer fees yet on the list, on the buyer agent or the listing agent side. No one's really doing that. Doesn't mean they're not. Doesn't mean you can't ask for it. But the rental side, I'm seeing a lot more there. But if we get into a market where I'm having to show 100 properties, and that's where I think it makes sense to charge a retainer fee, is when I know this is going to be a long-term process, which I guess really during the hot market, that probably would have made sense too, because you were running around for months with this person without any compensation. And the retainer fee can be taken out of the compensation you finally do receive. So you just give a credit at the table back to the buyer or the tenant later, or any of them later, for the work you've done. Yeah, Laura?
Yeah, I was charging a retainer fee, and I had charged a retainer fee on a couple of mine, but I found out it just got a little bit complicated at the end because when I got the retainer fee, it was paid to me as soon as I got it.
Yeah.
And then they would take, KW was taking a percentage out of that. So if it was like on one of them, I had that they would get it back at the end. And so it gets I kind of lost money on that.
Yeah. I see what you're saying. Okay. That's a good point.
Anthony,
Until you cap. Yes, Leah.
I have a question. On the Maryland listing, it requires that you put the total compensation to be paid by the listing broker.
Right.
But it also have a part to do how much you pay the buyer's agent and how much you pay the sub agent.
Right.
So I'm a little confused there because, sometimes you mix the two regions together.
Right.
Can you look at that, please?
Sure. Let me pull that up real quick for my Maryland brothers and sisters. So, guys, we're just doing a round robin here on these things. So, if y'all need to head out, go ahead. We got the main thing done, which was the compensation piece. But what they're talking about in Maryland is the place where it's here it is. So in Maryland, here we go.
Yeah.
Compensation. Real estate commission rates are not fixed. Commission rates are negotiable between seller and broker. In the event of a sale, exchange, or transfer, the compensation to be paid by the seller to broker shall be X, right? And you put down what you do, the dozen bananas. All right. Then the compensation shall be deemed earned if, then next paragraph, authority to cooperate with brokers. Brokers authorized to cooperate with other brokers. Okay. Broker shall pay in the event that I have a brand X real estate, which is like, 99%. Broker shall pay to any sub agent. Broker shall pay to any buyer broker. All right. So it means I get my dozen bananas up here and I offer out, half of them to this buyer broker, or a fourth of it, or a third of it, or whatever it is. because in Maryland, the broker's still passing the money from the seller piece over here. All right. So that's the listing side. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yes.
Right. Now, in the contract world of Maryland, you have two forms. There's the Maryland Listing Brokers Offer of Cooperative Compensation. This form is not, okay, this is for the buyer broker, the buyer, the listing broker, and the seller to sign. So like a DPOR form, a disclosure form, when you list the property, get me and the seller to sign off ahead of time.
Oh.
And then this is for when you're ready to go under contract, you send this over to the buyer agent and they take care of it. But what this is, listing brokers offer of cooperative, it's the listing broker's offer of cooperative compensation. In the event of a sale of the above property, listing broker shall pay cooperative compensation to the buyer in the amount of X of the purchase price. Okay. Then we got the sub agent, how much they're going to pay. So that's this form. In the event of a sale or exchange, above party is made to a buyer, produced or assisted by. So this comes with the contract if you want, if there's no offer. If like the Maryland agent says, look, you need to put it in the contract, then you put it on this. This is where we have this on page 1. Let me explain it this way. In Virginia, where this is on page 1, one line, this is an addendum to the contract in Maryland.
Oh.
Listing brokers offer of cooperative compensation. So this is everyone agreeing to how much you're going to pay. All right. So I'm sorry, this is not signed early on. This is at the time the contract is written. I'm getting this mixed up with another form. So this comes from the buyer broker. It comes from the buyer and the sub agent, whatever. And then everyone signs this that the listing broker shall pay. The listing broker shall pay. All right. Then there's another compensation form. Of course, it's Maryland. The Virginia joke about Maryland contracts. They're the land of addenda. So you saw the other one, right? Everyone, the broker is paying. And here's how much the broker is paying. We have that agreement because the money is still flowing through the brokerage. This addendum for the contract is in case. So prior to the execution of this addendum, the listing broker has agreed to pay buyer's broker an offer of cooperative. How much? That's a declaration of this form. I'm going to pay 3 bananas to a buyer broker. Okay. And so in addition, but let's say that the buyer wants to pay their agent 6 bananas, not 3 bananas. They're going to take the 3 bananas and they're putting that in this little paragraph 1. But Mr. Seller, I want 3 more bananas. And so the seller hereby authorizes a settlement agent to pay buyer's broker blank the sum of 1 and 2 of the total amount. Maryland agents, any questions on that?
It's a little confusing. When do you?
All right, so here we go. This is the listing agreement. Which one am I on? Yeah, this is Virginia, I believe. Yeah. No, this is Maryland. Okay. Paragraph 14 and 15. Here's my compensation. If I'm in Maryland, I can put a dozen bananas and then split it up down here to buyer brokers. All right, that's what I can do. But let's say I do a dozen bananas and down here, I'm offering out 3 bananas to the buyer broker. So I let them know on this form that I'm giving you 3 bananas.
Okay.
It just, am I giving a buyer broker 3 bananas or I'm giving a sub agent 3 bananas? Because remember, sub agent is a sub agent of the listing company from brand X. They're not a buyer broker. That's what, so usually this has 0 in it, honestly.
Yeah. Yes.
Right. So you would put what you're willing to pay as a listing broker. I'm willing to give you 3 bananas on this form. So they sign it. They say, thank you. I appreciate it. But you know what? I want more than that. Where's my form at? Yeah. Here's the 3 bananas, but I want another 3 bananas. And so if they agree, the seller will hereby authorize the settlement company to give me 6 bananas. The 3 from the buyer, the listing brokerage, and the 3 from the seller. That's the 6 bananas they're going to pay me if the seller agrees. So this is how they negotiate in Maryland.
Okay.
On the compensation. It's not in the contract. It's in these 2 addendum.
Okay. Oh, that's the difference. Yeah. Yeah. Makes sense.
So if you're missing these addendum, somebody's not getting paid. And I've seen that happen. Early on, I saw this happening. I went back and said, so the buyer agent, this was on our listing. I said, so the buyer agent's not getting paid anything? And the agent didn't understand it wasn't in it. My agent, I said, you need to call that agent right away and ask your seller, were you expecting to pay any compensation? Well, yeah, I thought I was paying X because I had that in my listing paperwork.
Yes. Yes.
I knew I was paying 6 bananas. But it wasn't memorialized in the contract because in that new period of time, the agents weren't grasping these extra 2 pieces here.
Yes. Okay. Thank
Okay.
you. Yes, that's clear.
All right, folks.
Thank you.
Sure. Anything else?
Oh, Anthony,
Yeah,
can you hang on for 30 seconds?
I can hang on for 30 seconds only. So anyway. All right. If there's nothing else, folks, y'all can all leave and Melanie and I are going to have a call.
Okay.
See y'all.